Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to do a tutorial on how I make these ephemera folders. I recently made a few different variations for my shop and I thought I'll document the process and show you how I've created this particular one. I love using a manila folder. I find it's the perfect size and the structure's already there for you. I find these usually at my local stationery store. If you can't find any manila folders in the area that you live, then I would suggest using a large cardstock, possibly the ones that you use for school projects. I think you'll be able to cut up and use as well. You can also use a 12 by 12 paper, but your ephemera folder will be much smaller. So depending on what ephemera you would like to store in, you can use either of these. So you have to decide how large you would like it to be. I start off by cutting my manila folder in half. And you will see that you have one side here that is slightly longer, and I'm going to work with this side first. And I want to cut this part off so that the leftover piece is roughly 13 centimeters long. The fold is already there for me, so this is going to create my first flap. Now for my second flap, I'm moving on to the shorter side, and here I need to create the fold. So I'm using a ruler and I'm just measuring out how long I would like this flap to be or wide. And I have chosen to make it 7.5 centimeters today. These flaps can be as wide or as narrow as you would like them to be, just as long as they fold over each other. I'm using a ruler just to create that fold and to smooth it out. Of course, you can also use a scorch board, but I thought for today's video, I'm just going to be using the basic tools. So now the structure of my folder is already there in 3 easy steps. And I am going to round the corners just because that's the look that I'm going for today. You can leave the edges as it is and just have the folder look slightly different. So this is up to your own preference. To give the folder more of a vintage look and also for it to stand out slightly, I'm going to distress the edges with some Tim Holtz Distress ink. I'm using the shade Tea Dye, but I also like using Vintage Photo. You can basically use any color that you would like. Now we get to the decorative part, and I want to line the inside of my ephemera folder with some ledger paper. I'm going to use a glue stick because I find it works really well. With a wet glue, what will happen is it will sometimes slightly change the texture of the paper or the card, and you end up not having a smooth surface. It can also create some folds in the paper, which is quite difficult to get out. So I'm going to stick this in sections, and as I move along, I am closing the folder, creating those folds again, and then any air bubbles or folds that it might create, I'm just smoothing out with my ruler as I move along. Now I want to trim off the excess paper. There is going to be slightly an overhang, so I'm just using my scissors and cutting along the ephemera folder. While I wait for the ledger paper to dry, I'm going to move on to the pockets. For the pockets, I'm going to use the leftover manila folder that we've cut off earlier on. You can also use some decorative paper like a 12 by 12 scrapbook paper, which will already have a pattern on there. And I have chosen to add 4 pockets into my ephemera folder, but you can configure this as you would like to, depending on the ephemera that you're going to store in there. So for today's ephemera folder, I'm going to, on the left flap, add 2 small pockets. And for the middle of the ephemera folder, I'm doing a larger pocket. And then for the right flap, I'm going to do a long vertical pocket. So these pockets, I just measure the flaps and I cut it roughly to that size. And then how wide or how long you would like the pockets to be, depending on where you stick it, will all depend on your own preference and, as I say, what ephemera you'll be storing in there. So after cutting the pockets and measuring them and seeing if they're going to fit in the ephemera folder, I now want to decorate them. So you can use any type of tissue or collage paper to do this. If you have chosen to use the 12 by 12 scrapbook paper to create your pockets, then of course you will skip this step. So I have used the Tim Holtz collage paper in some of the other ephemera folders that I've made, and I will show you later on a few clips of how they've turned out. But for this folder, I'm going to choose this purple floral tissue paper, and I've cut these slightly larger than the pocket. And again, I'm going back to the glue to use to stick the tissue paper onto the pocket because I don't want to change the structure of the paper. Because these tissue papers have been cut slightly larger than the pocket itself, there will be an overhang. You can again trim them off like we did with the ledger paper earlier on, but I have decided to fold them in and stick them over. I find that it finishes off the pocket and it also makes it slightly sturdier, but you can do any of these methods, it doesn't really matter. We're moving on to sticking the pockets into the ephemera folder, and for this I want to use a wet glue. It's stronger and it's going to hold much better. So I'm using the Halma 450 quick drying glue. I really love to use this glue and I also find that it works really well, but you can use any wet glue. However, don't use double-sided tape if you're going to put it through the sewing machine, because I find that the double-sided tape never dries, and when you put it through the sewing machine, they are just not good friends because the needle keeps sticking to the double-sided tape and it pulls on the thread. So you might get some erratic sewing happening. It isn't impossible, but it's not recommended. I wouldn't recommend it anyway. I haven't had good experiences with that method. So that's why I'm using a wet glue. You can, however, skip the sewing step. You don't have to do that either. So while we're waiting for the pockets to dry, we are moving on to decorating the outside of our ephemera folder. You can be as creative as you would like to be here. You can add some stamping, but today I'm going to use a 12 by 12 paper and I'm going to cut off or cut out 3 panels. I would like to have a panel on each flap and then also one at the back. So I'm measuring my folder and I'm just cutting these panels 1 centimeter shorter because I would like the ephemera folder to still stand out. And also the distressing that we've done, we don't want to cover that up. So after cutting out the panels, I'm again using the same glue and I'm just sticking them on. We're going to wait for the ephemera folder to dry completely, and then this is an optional step. I'm just going to put it through the sewing machine. I find it rounds everything off and it just reinforces all the pockets and the panels that we've stuck onto the ephemera folder. But with the glue that we've used, it should be lasting a really long time. So if you don't have a sewing machine, you don't have to worry about this step. I have chosen to do a zigzag stitch, but you can play around and do a straight stitch or mix the two up. We're going to work on the closure of the ephemera folder now. And for this, I'm using the leftover manila folder again, and then a circle punch, and I'm just punching out 2 big circles and sticking them on top of each other. And that's the structure for our closure, and we want to close it with a piece of string. So we need to make sure that those 2 big circles are slightly lifted off from the ephemera folder. So we're looking for 2 smaller circles. Now I don't have a small circle punch, so I'm just going to use the stencil that I've got, and I'm going to get 2 smaller circles out of that. If you don't have any circle punches, I would just recommend getting a circle stencil like this. It's very versatile. You've got different sizes of circles. It's a bit more effort, but it's better than having multiple circle punches of different sizes that you don't really use that much. So I'm sticking the 2 smaller circles on top of each other as well, and then I'm going to turn around my big circle and then just stick the 2 smaller ones in the middle of that. And I'm going to distress also the closure so that it fits with the rest of the ephemera folder. I have also made a cross in the middle of this bigger circle because I would like to just punch a hole through that. And I'm also going to punch a hole through the ephemera folder where I would like this circle to be. So you're looking for the center of your ephemera folder. So again, just use a ruler to measure that out. And to attach this to the ephemera folder, I'm going to use an eyelet, or I'm actually using two eyelets, a larger one and a smaller one. I bought it in a pack like that, but you also get some from American Crafts where it's just a single eyelet, which you could also use. And I am just using my Crop-A-Dile to attach that to the ephemera folder. For the next step, you can use any type of twine or string. For today, I'm going to use hemp cord, and I've got a meter here. So I start off by wiggling it under the circle closure, and I'm just doing a knot on the one side and then turning it around and bringing over both sides of the string. And then I finish it off by doing a double knot, and you'll have a long piece of the string and a short piece. So I'm just going to trim the short piece so it folds slightly under the closure and you can't really see it. And now you can close up the ephemera folder in many different configurations, but this is one of my favorite ways of closing it. And at the end of the hemp cord, we're going to add a camera charm. You can add any charm of your choice, and I've also added a tassel before, which I really like as well. So again, we're just doing a double knot there to make sure that the charm is secure. And that's the basics of how I make this folder. Now it's time to fill it with some ephemera, and I have chosen in the one small pocket to add these labels or tabs, and then I'm also going to include some vintage postage stamps. And then in the second small pocket, I'm going to add a variety of floral, plant and fruit stickers. And then in the middle pocket, I've got some birds here that I've cut out of a vintage bird book, and I'm just arranging them in a very aesthetic way. For the last pocket on the right hand side, I'm going to be adding these floral playing cards. So as I've promised, here are a few different variations of ephemera folders that I've made with different ephemera in them, but also very similar. And then some pockets that I've used the Tim Holtz clutch paper on, and also different 12 by 12 papers that I've used to decorate the outside. They've got different charms on, however, all of them are really similar in style. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider to do so. Give this video a like, comment, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.